Hi, my name's Artemis, and obviously one of the age-old arguments within this fandom is whether or not you are too old for the fandom. Is there an age limit? What qualifies as too old? And since I have recently entered a new decade of my life, I have some fucking thoughts on this bullshit subject. And yes, you're right, I am about to share them. Now, obviously, it's pretty easy to see that it's a common assumption that the fandom is geared around those in their early 20s. Let's just call them the younger generations, because I'm in my 30s now, and apparently that means I'm old. But there are a numerous amount of reasons why the fandom gets this general assumption, and I think a lot of it comes down to the world that we're living in. You see, social media, technology, all of that jazz means that exposure to these things is very fucking easy for a lot of people. Like, I for sure would have been a furry a hell of a lot fucking sooner if I'd known it had existed. At the time, I did not. I did not know that there were things that were, able to go to, like meets. I did not know that there were various groups on different social media platforms. I just was not aware that any of it actually fucking existed. And the fact that these days social media is a massive part of the way we live our lives means that those in the younger generations have a greater chance of seeing this thing and wondering, I wonder, what kind of slutty animal could I become? And that's exactly what I think happens with a lot of them. It also seems to be that a lot of people generally need a bit more support, a bit more social grouping in the fandom at younger ages. I mean, let's be honest, the fandom has always been a haven for people who just don't feel at home in their current situation. If you're a little bit weird, a little bit of an oddball, or just a general outsider, then you're going to find a home in the fandom because it's welcoming, accepting, and well, if you feel like you're being judged, you're not. You're just not. And if you are, then those people are dicks. But that can often be something that comes from a lack of life experience or lived experience. And I feel like a lot of people in the younger generations are going to be a bit more prone to that than those in the older generations. And obviously, it doesn't always work that way. There are a lot of people who stay more closeted with themselves, who put on that mask and that pretense, and can often come to this thing later in life. But I think the trend is pretty simple, that this is basically a bunch of, early 20-year-olds that are just running the show, when in reality, that is not the case. Don't believe what the assumptions spout. So here's the fun thing I get with the double standard of it all, with the fact that people are like, oh, you're too old for the fandom, you shouldn't be hanging around this long, it's disgusting. And I'm just like, let's think about what people come to the fandom for. By and large, it is obviously the enjoyment of anthropomorphic animals, but there's things like, commercial things, like they want artwork of their character, they want to commission a fursuit, they want to go to conventions. Or maybe they're just here for the social side of things and they just want to meet people and go about and have fun with friends. These are things that need money. These are things that you need to have a good position in your life, financially and socially, to be able to go out and do. Not everybody has the luxury of just dipping into a bank account and saying, you know what, fuck it, I might be 18, but I can use daddy's credit card to commission myself a $20,000 fursuit. That isn't for everybody. So it's kind of funny that you're like, oh, you're too old for the fandom, but also you have to get to your position in life to actually be able to enjoy the fandom to its fullest and go to every convention that you want to. What? Maybe it comes down to a point of jealousy. I'm not saying that that is the purest motivation for all of this angst and argumentative angst, I guess. I'm going to use that word twice. But there is definitely an element of it. I mean, if somebody has, worked in the fandom or has commissioned a lot of stuff and just generally been here for a long time and they have all these lovely things that someone else potentially doesn't have, then, yeah, they might want to just flip the old switch of, oh, well, you're too old, you're just an old man anyway, and ridiculous. But it doesn't just swing with the money side either. It does come with, a level of maturity and a level of social skills. Now, I'm not going to make judgments here because everybody matures and gains social skills at different speeds, but taking away the age and taking more the point in your life, your personal journey, it's a good job I didn't actually arrive in the fandom too soon, because I did not have the social skills to be able to make it work, and I needed to learn those. So, considering that everybody learns their social skills in different ways and at different times, a lot of people could come to this fandom a lot later than they would, because that's the point where they're ready to engage in it and the point where they're ready to actually gain this circle of friends and work through all of it properly. Just because some people are taking a bit longer than others doesn't mean that they're too old for this shit, and it's kind of shitty to assume that, because it's not a fucking sprint, it's a marathon, and it doesn't really matter when you start it, it just matters whether you want to go the distance. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Now, there is also some imagined friction between the sort of old guard and the new guard, which isn't actually really all that much of a thing, but there are some things there that have a kernel of truth to them. You see, there's always going to be some friction between the old and the young, and the new to the more experienced, and yeah, sometimes we do get people spouting bullshit in the fandom, but generally you will find that they are obviously not supported by the fandom in general, but those points that come up, I can sort of understand it. There's always going to be a level of misplaced anger and angst at those who are older than you, because you are constantly fighting assumptions, you are constantly fighting perceptions placed upon you, and, you know, that whole back in my day, and, well, I didn't have to struggle like this, and you start thinking like, well, when they were this age, they were doing better, and all of that general shit. So it's easy to see why that can be placed upon the grey muzzles in the fandom, and that sort of misplaced anger can be misdirected towards them. But honestly, I think it can also get a bit simpler. I mean, let's just really get down to brass tacks here. To some people, the fandom is a overtly sexual thing. They get a lot of sexual gratification in it, through it, from it, of it, around it. This can really boil down to fuckability, let's just say it. Like, sometimes people are just looking for, you know, the hot 20-year-old twink with the washboard abs and a perfectly polished ring piece that they can proceed to break. So that does honestly come down to it for some people, and that can be why it's less of a, you're too old for the fandom, and more, you're too old for my personal preferences. But I do think as well, some of it can come down to an idealized sense of teen years and the early 20s. I mean, we all think that that's the best time in our lives. You watch any stupid fucking Hollywood movie, and apparently it's supposed to be, and by the time you turn 25, you're supposed to have a house, kids, and everything in your life figured out. Obviously, that's the way it goes for everybody, says the dog on the internet. But obviously there can be a little bit of a sort of angst against that, and more importantly, a judgment when it turns out that that perception is fucking wrong. And then you see people in their 30s, 40s, 50s in the fandom who are not doing as well as you feel they should be, and you see them as something less. You judge them too harshly, and suddenly you feel like you are above them and that maybe they don't belong in this fandom. Well, if they've not been able to match up to my expectations, then maybe there's something wrong with them and they shouldn't be here. I've said this word a lot, but I'm going to say it again. That is bullshit. So why exactly do we keep getting around to this point that we have a larger population of younger people? And no, it's not because all the oldies die, but rather, I feel like the need to gain these social skills in this social area is more attuned to being earlier in your development, let's say. I'm trying not to say to being a fucking teenager, but a lot of the times, you know, at certain earlier points in life, that's when a lot of the bigger discoveries come, and that's when a lot of the bigger points where you're like, oh my god, I'm gay, or oh my god, I'm not gay, I'm ace, or oh my god. You get a lot of these discoveries at a certain point in life, and you're obviously seeking out certain social circles where you can be accepted for that, because the sad fact of humanity is that it's not always acceptable in your day-to-day life, now is it? You're not going to find that freedom of expression that you would like. So that's why I feel we have a lot of people rushing into this fandom. It has a very idealized view of everything and how amazing and magical it all is. And you get people that experience, get exposed to it at a very early age, and they sort of hang around on the periphery until they are 18 or so and can join in fully. And they've, obviously been building these expectations in their mind for a good long time at that point. But it is generally something that I feel a lot of people enter into and then move away from when they've found what they were looking for. So the younger population is always constantly refreshing, but the older population, that isn't. There's always going to be younger people wanting to join this fandom. There's always going to be just people wanting to join it in general. But It's only when you get a bit older do you start to think like, maybe I don't need to go to every convention. Maybe I don't need to be as active online, or, maybe I can shut down the OnlyFans that shows the very intricate details of my, large intestine. Like, as you get older, your priorities shift and they change, and the world wears you down a little bit. So that's when you start to take a step away and focus on the actual friends you made along the way, rather than, the fandom itself. And that's when you think that maybe I won't be as active. And there we have it. The young are always going to be the ones that are louder, prouder, and definitely more noticeable. So maybe that has a thing to say with it. God, I sound like an old fucking man in this video. My God. Sound like I'm about to turn grey and die. But thankfully, I don't sound old enough to vote Tory, so that's something. So the last point that I would like to touch on would be the difference between there being an age limit and a time limit within the fandom. Now, I have posited the theory before that from the second you arrive in the fandom, there is a ticking clock counting down to the point where you no longer really find yourself in it anymore. Because I've noticed a lot of people have, sort of come running into the room like, yeah, I'm here in the fandom. And then from that point on, they're just slowly backing themselves back out again. And I do think that obviously the fandom is basically like a big meet and greet room. Like, if you're not sure what to do with yourself, you go into the fandom, this meet and greet room, you see what's available, you talk to plenty of people, you get some experience, socially. And then you figure out what it is you want and you say, cool, okay, let's go and do that thing that I want. And then the fandom is no longer as important. I feel a lot of people come into the fandom looking for specific things. I know I did. And then when they find those things and they focus more on those than their inclusion and activity within the fandom, then it sort of sits on a back burner. And if you combine this with the fact that, again, you are expected to have gotten all of this shit done by the time you're like 25, 26 at the latest, then those who are older in the fandom are judged to have failed at this. And there must be a reason for that. So then the judgments start piling on again. And there's a lot of different reasons why that doesn't happen. Some people come to this fandom for a career. They stick around for years, decades even. They live and work within it. They make their money off of it. And that's fair. Some people have always treated it as a light hobby that they enjoy. They've never gotten so invested that it's the biggest part of their life. So it's never taken that kind of toll on them. But on the other side of things, some people get overexposed to the fandom and some of its more negative aspects, and they decide to take a step away. Because for some people, the experience is different and they're not looking to stay in this thing. So it's less that potentially somebody is too old for the fandom, and more that somebody has just been in it for just a bit too long. And sometimes if it's damaging to you, toxic, or you're just no longer enjoying it like you used to, you have this weird sense of loyalty to it, just sticking around, because, this is where you came first, when you felt that way. So surely it must be the fix, now you feel that way again. And that's, again, something that can pile on the judgments. It's something that some people deal with. I honestly, you can tell by this video, there is no such thing as too old for the fandom, but I do believe that some people, they are holding on to it because they've lost love for it, but they don't know what else to go to. I'm not saying that I'm in that boat, by the way. This isn't a cry for help, I swear. I've done plenty of videos that are just veiled cries for help, okay? In fact, fuck it, I'll make a playlist. Oh, but what do you think? Is there an age limit to the fandom? Correct answer is no, but this was a video I wanted to make because you see this get recycled around and around and around, and people always have an opinion on it, and I thought, I've not shouted at my opinion at the camera in a while, so I should do that, and that's what I did. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, there will be a selection of support options here. Select one. Not a choice, not optional. But yes, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about all of this. Did I make sense? Did my points make sense? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Have you supported on Patreon yet? All of these things are things that I want answers to. But yes, honestly, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I guess I'll see you next week. Goodbye.